Kerry Boulton is Australia's most respected exit strategy advisor and CEO of the Exit Strategy Group. Welcome to this week's segment.
When you decide to exit your business, it can mean many different things to different people. And it really will depend on what you want to achieve and what you want to do after you leave the business and, really what your current situation is. And exit strategies can be structured to suit anyone with basically any sort of outcome, and they do vary greatly. I mean, maybe if all you want to do is free up time and energy and resources to explore some other interests, then there's a way of being able to achieve that without actually completely leaving your business altogether. Or maybe at the other end of the spectrum, you might want to totally cash out and walk away from the business without turning back. Take no prisoners, and off you go onto your next reinvention or whatever that might be. So I thought it would be a really good idea to explore some of the basic exit options that are available for small to medium businesses. And we're not going to have any bells and whistles on these, and there's just a different way for you to be able to cash out either some of the value that you've created or some of the time that you'd like to have and be able to get on to doing other things. Of course, one of the things that you really do have to take into account is your personal goals and your business goals, and also the goals of all or any of the other stakeholders. So really important to take that into account. So let's think about employees and two areas there with key management, for instance, who could be involved. And in this case, you could have a managed buyout or a leveraged buyout if you've got key management who could be interested or potentially interested in taking over the business. And then, of course, you could have a much broader scheme with your employees in general where you could have a share scheme, again, a managed buyout with more than your key management. There are things like phantom share schemes, and there are also share bonuses that you can have in place to be able to make it attractive to your employees to be able to buy the business from you. So if you are, for instance, looking at selling to management or key employees, maybe the advantages of that would be simply that the business stays in what you might call the extended family, so that they've been involved in the business. You don't have to go through a significant due diligence process that you would probably you would do with someone else. They know the business well, and they can do a really good job of selling its merits to a lender, for instance, if they need an equity investor to help them buy the business out. There's also a lot of less risk in that situation because the management team won't be disrupted, and they can continue working as if it was the way it always has. And if they need to partner with someone else, an equity investor, that'll work really well because they'll have confidence in that senior management that's actually been in the company and working there for quite a while. They may need growth capital, so that's something always worthwhile considering. So if you were to look at the disadvantages, it could be that normally a lender requires members of the management team to contribute 30% or more of the purchase price in equity. That might be difficult in some circumstances, depending on how they're placed. And they may not be able to actually buy the business without outside help. So that type of participation can sometimes create cultural or management conflicts that need to be taken into account. And if the company's assets aren't great enough to be able to leverage the transaction and the management team can't actually make up the difference, then you might have to do something yourself. You might have to actually provide the, vendor finance, which is not unheard of these days at all. In fact, it's something that I would advocate could be well worthwhile considering. Another exit strategy involving your employees would be via an employee share scheme or an employee share plan, sometimes called an ESOP. So if you wanted to sell the business to a number or all of your employees rather than just the management team, you might find that an employee share scheme is a good way to actually cash out part or all of your interests in the business. One of the issues with these schemes, though, is, of course, that they're quite complex and they do require specialised setup with expert legal and taxation advice. Fundamentally, it means the employees can buy the shares as part of their employee share scheme. It's sometimes called an ESOP for short, ESOP, employee share scheme. And the shares are either purchased or granted free of charge or gifted to the employees. They can be financed by a loan or deductions from the salaries in the way of salary sacrifice. They could be set up as bonuses and profit shares. And some companies actually use rights or options as well. But in simple terms, an ESOP provides a way for the employees to become part owners or full owners in their employer's business. And it's a very good thing to think about if you have the type of business that this could be suitable for. As I said, it's unfortunately quite complicated and it can be expensive to set up and maintain. And it really is only suitable for a gradual exit over time. And there are significant regulatory and legislative burdens that you'll have to consider. But on the advantage side, owning shares in a company could in fact make the employees think and act like owners and may well increase productivity. And it very much is an employee benefit. And there's also some significant tax benefits here in Australia to employees through, I think it's called a Division 83A. Anyway, that's part of the expert legal and advice that you would, and taxation advice that you would need to get from specialists in that field. Another exit option that you can consider is the transfer of ownership to family members. Now, in the 2013 KPMG Family and Business Survey, they identified that 66% of business owners who were surveyed said they wanted to transfer their business to the next generation, which is fantastic. But in reality, unfortunately, less than a third actually do that. And the reason that that has such a low success rate is that there are many different issues around this type of transfer. Not the least of which is that quite often the family don't really even want to be involved in the business. But let's have a look at the advantages, the pros and cons of this type of transfer. And if you are considering that you'd like to do that and transfer to a family, I'd really encourage you to think about other options as well and not just keep all your eggs in this one basket of transferring to family. So what are the advantages, do you think, that you could have with this? Well, usually it's fulfilling a personal goal of keeping the business and the family together, which would be fantastic. And certainly it could provide really good financial well-being to the younger members of the family. And they may not be able to earn a comparable income from outside employment. Yes, you can stay actively involved in the business with your children if that's what you really want to do. And it really could afford you the luxury of determining how much you need or how much you want from the business rather than being told how much you're going to get from a third party. That's on the plus side. Maybe on the negative side, looking at the cons of it, it's also going to hold great potential to create or increase disharmony in the family and feelings of unequal treatment among siblings. Often that's really quite onerous and difficult to work out. And the normal objective of treating all children equally is really difficult because one child will probably run or own the business at the perceived expense of the others, even though that may not be so, but they'll perceive it that way. Unfortunately, too, family members can't usually afford to pay cash at the time of closing. So as a result, when you're the one who's actually selling, you're going to have to accept payment over time, and that may or may not suit you. But financial security is often diminished rather than enhanced, and unfortunately many businesses do suffer when they're transferred to a family member who either can't or won't run it properly. They just take on a different persona once they get in there to run the business themselves. And you know what? Family dynamics may well diminish you as the owner, your control over the business and its operations pretty significantly. And it'll really increase your stress rather than decrease your level of personal stress and anxiety. So that's why it's really, really helpful to think about other ways that you may want to exit your business, just so that you do have other options available to you. Families have their own systems and cultures. Businesses have their own systems and cultures. And being able to actually meld the two together at times can be a real challenge. Another exit option could be selling to co-owners or other shareholders that might be in the business. And obviously this isn't an option that everybody has, but if you do, it could very much be a ready market for your shares. So if you're well prepared and if you do have a buy-sell agreement that sets out what can happen when one or more of the shareholders want to leave the business, then you'll have a lot of clarity around how you can make this happen. So I'm hoping that you would have a buy-sell agreement that would have been in place from the very early days, and that the arrangement is actually still current and you can use it for exiting. So what would you have in terms of the advantages in this situation? It would be fantastic because the business does stay in quotes again, the extended family. The fellow shareholder will know the business and doesn't have to be convinced of the prospects and the value and the growth that'll be there. You know that you're going to be dealing with a buyer who's willing to purchase your own shares rather than insisting on any type of asset transaction. And that could be quite significant when you're wanting to liquidate your investment. And if you do have a well-prepared shareholders agreement, it's really going to make the transfer process a lot easier than it would be if you were selling to an external third party. And if you're leaving, if the shareholder that's actually leaving, you can arrange an automatic purchase of your shares by the company or the other shareholders in the event of death, and the price can be funded with Keyman Life Insurance, assuming that that's already been pre-arranged. And if you've been a prudent business owner, you will have done that. That's exactly what you'll have. So what would be the disadvantages perhaps in this situation? So if your shares are actually sold to other shareholders and you haven't had a properly prepared shareholders agreement, the terms might force you to accept a price that's not actually reflecting your company's fair market value. And that could be a point of conflict, obviously. Perhaps you could be locked into selling your shares only to your fellow shareholders, in which case you have a very limited market and it's going to depress the company's value. Again, selling to other shareholders doesn't typically result in the maximum value for the company, but it could. But on the other hand, if the purchase price for your shares not funded by some type of insurance, then the shareholder agreement or a buy-sell agreement may have to have an extended payout. And that might create some financial risk for you and your family if the business doesn't continue to grow and prosper when you're not there. So another obvious exit strategy is selling to a third party. And this type of sale can take very many forms and a variety of terms and conditions. You could find a buyer who's a competitor. You could find a buyer who's a customer, a supplier. You could be in the same industry. And those are strategic buyers. Alternatively, you could find a financial buyer, such as a private equity group or a hedge fund or perhaps an institutional investor, or maybe just simply a personal buyer who wants to actually get into the business that you have. It's really, really important to understand what the buyer's objectives are when they're looking at your business and why they really want to buy the business. it's as important for you to do your own due diligence on the buyer as it is for the buyer to do the due diligence on your business, because different buyer motives will affect the business, and it may be something that doesn't fit with your own personal and business goals and objectives. For instance, a financial buyer might be the best fit for you if you want to liquidate your investment in the business while staying involved in a management capacity. However, remember, the time horizon for growth and cashing out may be at odds with your personal objectives, so you've got to make sure that they fit together with one another. A strategic buyer, for instance, could also offer you a partnership type of solution, which allows you to cash out at least part of your investment. And this type of buyer could be the one that you really need if you have a specific business goal that you're unable to achieve on your own. So once again, if you're a well-prepared business, that may well be the best way for you to cash out and achieve multiple business and personal goals. So what would be the advantages of being able to sell out to a third party? First of all, the fundamental advantage is that you will in fact receive a majority of the purchase price in cash at closing, assuming you've negotiated that, of course. This type of exit strategy also typically results in the highest valuation for a business because you have natural market forces at play, and in any natural market, you're going to be able to find the best result for yourself. The price that you can obtain from a third party is more likely to be equal to the fair market value of the company, if not more. And a third-party sale is the only exit option that offers you the potential of access to buyers with a strategic or synergistic motive, leading to a sale at a premium to fair market value in a strategic sale. And it may well be the best option for a business that's too valuable to be purchased by someone in the family, for instance. So you really do have to look to the external marketplace. And a large variety of available buyers makes it possible for you to find a buyer who will allow you to satisfy your exit needs. And relating to some of the soft issues that are involved, such as time, in addition to the money issues. So you can negotiate the right sort of exit for yourself depending on your own goals. So what's the downside? What would be the disadvantages of selling to a third party? If you want to stay on after a sale to a third party, you will find yourself in the role as an employee, which can be very difficult to handle. In other words, top banana one day and you're down to the bottom of the fruit bowl with some of the rotting fruit the next day. That can be difficult to handle from a personal perspective. Sometimes third-party buyers will need you to actually finance a portion of their purchase price with a note or an earn-out structure. And, that could be difficult if you're no longer in control of the company and you're not able to make decisions that are actually going to be controlling the company's future growth. It depends on the planning that's been done and obviously the discussions that you've had in terms of your negotiation. Selling to a third party can often take a long time. It could be 9 to 12 months for it to actually execute. And it could also result in a loss of customers and employees if confidentiality is not well managed. It can be a significant hurdle to overcome, and it's one of those issues that you really do need to take into account when you make a decision to sell your business. Another exit strategy is going public, often referred to as IPO, initial public offering. And really, this can be the ultimate exit strategy. There's no doubt that going public is a very exciting and very successful exit strategy for many entrepreneurs, business owners. However, a very small percentage of private companies can ever go public. You really need to be in the vicinity of a $50 million business, probably as a minimum, to even consider going public. And for all its strengths, it has a number of significant weaknesses that a lot of owners are unaware of. And going public is not really a realistic option, as I said earlier, for the vast majority of private businesses. and it very much depends on market conditions and investing trends. So what are the advantages? Let's have a look at those. Going public does provide you with additional capital to help fund a company's growth, and almost all companies primarily go public because they need money. So a typical IPO raises capital from, from 10 to 40 million perhaps, but offerings up to 100 million aren't unusual either. I'm sure you've seen many offerings out there with large prospectus and whatever the listing price might be. It does create significant liquidity for you and your key managers and other employees if they happen to have an opportunity to get in on the ground floor. Going public does give you a higher profile than any private firm, and it's important in industries where success requires customers or clients to make long-term commitments. Many big companies prefer to work with public companies because the public stature creates a sense of security. So you're not a mum and dad shop, so to speak, who might not be around tomorrow. Many government contracts rely on businesses that are of a significant size just to make certain that they're going to be around for the future to be able to deliver on those contracts, for instance. It does help to be able to offer employees shares that are actually liquid, whereas in a private company, you really have an illiquid market. But when you're in a public company, you have shares that you can actually sell on the stock market, and that will improve a company's ability to be able to attract key management as well. And of course, valuation multiples of public companies are generally significantly higher than multiples paid for smaller private companies. It follows that the bigger the business, the higher the multiple that you'll receive. So it's worthwhile considering that when you're thinking of your own growth strategy as well. Now let's have a look at the negative side. What would be the disadvantages if you're thinking about going public? As I said earlier, it's not available as an exit option for most owners of private companies. It's really only typically available for high growth companies with significant revenues and earnings. So it will mean diluting your own ownership. If you're sitting on a gold mine, it means that all the future gold will be shared with new shareholders. However, if the price is right, it may well be worth it. Having 15% of a $150 million company as opposed to 100% of a $10 million company is an entirely different proposition. So diluting your shareholdings may not necessarily be the huge disadvantage that it's perceived to be at the outset, but it will mean your shareholding will be diluted. So a public company is naturally no longer private. So you're going to be giving up a great deal of privacy. After you go public, you have to file a number of regulatory reports, the tax office and with the stock exchange, and you have to comply with certain security laws and all the exchange guidelines, and all the disclosure that can be required can be quite disconcerting if you've been a private company for a long time and you don't quite know what you're in for in terms of the information that you have to make available. And of course, you might also tell your competitors a lot about your business that you were able to keep private before. And going public typically means a loss of control for you personally, the business owner. And in fact, investors can buy a significant stake in the company to actually take control and fire the founder. I'm sure you've heard of cases like that in the past where the CEOs have been thrown out by the shareholders because they've just not been happy with the way things have been going. And of course, an IPO is a very costly undertaking. Typically, you'd be spending 15 to 25% of the money that's actually raised on direct expenses. You wouldn't be able to go public to list a company for anything under $250,000, and that's not very significant. You'd be looking at a lot more money than that usually to be able to go public. And so the opportunity costs of doing something like that in terms of management time can really have a significant effect on the business. And going public doesn't necessarily provide existing shareholders with immediate liquidity. Quite often, the process of going public requires that the business owners have to hold on to their shares for a specific length of time, and they're locked into that for 12 months, 2 years, sometimes even longer following the IPO. So you're not necessarily going to have your liquidity straight away. Notwithstanding all of that, if your business is of a size that you could consider going public, then it's definitely worthwhile thinking about it. Another exit option, of course, is to simply liquidate the business. So if there's no one around to be able to buy your business, and you may have to shut it down, or you might just decide that you're going to shut it down, basically what you do when you're going to liquidate it is simply sell all of your assets. You're going to collect your outstanding accounts receivable. You're going to pay your bills and just keep what's left, if anything, for yourself. So typically liquidation only makes sense if your business lacks sufficient income producing capacity apart from your own direct efforts to support the investment required in the company's assets. Now, what do I mean by that, for example? So if a business can only produce $75,000 in profit every year and the assets themselves are worth $1 million, it would make the most sense to sell the assets at liquidation value. That's assuming, of course, that you can't sell the ongoing business. So the value of the assets is much higher than the value of the cash flow. So you wouldn't think that anybody would be buying that business from you. Or all they'd pay would be simply the value of the assets. You wouldn't be able to get anything else for it at all. So what would be the advantages of just liquidating it? Well, simply, it's a very simple and fast process, which is maybe what you want. The entire company doesn't have to be liquidated, though. The owner may decide to liquidate only part of the company and keep the more profitable parts, and I've seen that done on several occasions, to be able to slice and dice, so to speak. So if there is part of the business that isn't really making the money that you desire, but you can see opportunity in another part, well, you can just liquidate a portion of it. So that's definitely an advantage. What would be the disadvantages in this? Well, simply it does really result in the lowest possible value for a business because it only reflects the value of the assets. It's not going to reflect any value whatsoever for the effort that you've put in for the client or the customer lists or the employee knowledge or the name or reputation or any of the other intangible assets that are actually associated with the business that have a value attached to them. So you're not going to get anything for that at all. And of course, the other thing is that the cost of liquidating a company is almost as high as the cost of selling it. As a going concern, the perception is that this is the least expensive option. It's often incorrect because there's quite a lot of effort involved in it just the same. And of course, the other disadvantage is that the staff, the employees, and any of the key managers, of course, may well lose their jobs, which is maybe not the best outcome or not really the outcome that you're looking for in particular. So another exit strategy that you can consider is, in fact, restructuring the business. What do I mean by restructuring? I'm talking about the possibility of selling a minority stake in the business so that you exit part of your shareholding. You could, of course, also sell a majority stake, once again, removing yourself partially from the business. You could refinance some of the debt. If you have debt in the business, you can refinance the business and restructure in that way. And of course, there's also the opportunity to look at private equity investment as another way of restructuring your business. Let's just talk a little about that option. In fact, as a private equity firm may have some interest in getting involved in your business. And if you can see significant growth, which I hope you can, for your business future, then this may well be the way to go. They're a real alternative buyer And private equity in Australia is actually becoming more prevalent now. Usually you'd be looking at revenues of between 5 to, say, 100 million for a private equity firm to get involved. And this could well be the right answer for you. If you're not in a real hurry yourself to exit the business, then private equity can be the way to go. After a few years, you're going to find that there's a significant increase in the value of your business, and a private equity firm is going to be looking at turning it around something between 5 and 10 years. The way private equity works is that they'll go out, acquire an interest in a business, they will help put more capital into the business, and they'll ramp the business up to try and take advantage of as many growth strategies as they can, and then look for an exit in the next 5 years. So it's a relatively short but medium-term horizon. And the types of firms that are around involved in private equity are the superannuation funds, and there's some small boutique firms around as well, and they look to make multiple acquisitions based on set criteria as agreed by their investors. And it means that they can have a diversified portfolios, which actually reduces the risk to their investors, because not all of the companies that they acquire will do well, but some of them will perform amazingly, and overall the investment return is going to be what they're after. They're going to be looking for a minimum of 25% return. And in fact, when that's per annum, but when, of course, they look at exiting the business, they're going to be looking at significant multiples, well and truly above that. So if you think that having a private equity firm involved in your business, having a look at it, could be an advantage to you, then it's definitely something worth exploring. One of the things that does often happen with PE firms is that they will change the management. So you might stay on, you might not. It will just depend on what's negotiated. And the PE firm will bring with them some really impressive intellectual capital, so they'll be able to help you do the things that are needed to grow the business. And if they don't think that you can do it, then they're going to ask you to walk away. Some will actually offer a 100% purchase of your business, so they can have full management and operational control. So their aim is, in fact, to purchase the business at a minimal cost, and so they can maximise the growth potential and therefore the return to their investors. That might not give you personally the best deal if you really want to maximise the value. If you do want to exit and stay, then you might agree to a lower selling price, but stay contracted as an employee, but and also negotiate an extra payout based on the results that you actually get in the business. So you might you'd be wise to negotiate some bonuses and based on hitting some, targets and business metrics. And maybe you might want to, in fact, just have a minority shareholding at the start, which might increase as certain goals are actually met and achieved over the course of the time that you're involved. But you might find that it's difficult, once again, to be able to work in an environment where effectively you are answering to an external board. You're not necessarily the one making all the decisions. You really do have to act like you're the business manager rather than the owner, making your own decisions, and my way or the highway doesn't necessarily won't necessarily get you the result that you're looking for when you've got a private equity firm involved. They're a business partner. They're going to share the upside as well as the downside, and the funds that are actually injected are not only going to be able to pay you out as the business owner, but they're going to be there to invest in the growth and the expansion of the business. And because it's equity, you won't need to think about repaying the funds or making interest payments. So that can be a distinct advantage. And as I said earlier, when you get to the stage where the business actually will be exited, because that's also very much an exit strategy is very much a part of the private equity firm's involvement in your business. They have a specific time horizon where they want to exit the business. Then it really does give you an opportunity to multiply your investment that you've made many, many times over.
If you don't have a copy of Kerry's new book, The Uncensored Truth About Exit Strategies, please visit freeexitstrategybook.com.au.